The Senate has officially gone nuclear, but is that really such a bad thing? Let's ask tonight's politics panel. With me tonight are Shelby Emmett, attorney and National Advisory Council of Project 21, and Zed Jelani, journalist at The Intercept. Thank you both for being here. Let's get started. Senate Democrats filibustered Neil Gorsuch today, but that ended up only being a symbolic victory because Republicans quickly moved to exercise the so-called nuclear option. In a 52-48 party line vote, they blew up the Senate rules to kill the filibuster, setting the stage for Neil Gorsuch to be confirmed as the next Supreme Court justice. Here's what Minority Leader Chuck Schumer had to say about Republicans deploying the nuclear option.
There's a reason it was dubbed the nuclear option. It's the most extreme measure with the most extreme consequences. And while I'm sure we will continue to debate what got us here, I know that in 20 or 30 or 40 years, we will sadly point to today as a turning point in the history of the Senate and the Supreme Court.
So how right is Chuck Schumer on this? I mean, I think any other day, this would be the biggest story of the day, the biggest story of the week. Here we are about to go start a new war. We've got reshuffling in the White House. We've got a probe into Trump in Russia. So it's like the third biggest story today. But how significant is what happened today in the Senate going to be moving forward, Shelby?
Look, the Democrats asked for this. At the end of the day, what goes around comes around. I think we have to take a step back and first realize that a lot of this problems in the Senate and Congress generally is a result of how they changed the Senate. Before, the point of this system was the House was supposed to represent the passions and the wills of the people. The Senate was supposed to be a little more adult and look at things on a long-term basis, which is why they were elected and appointed a different way. Now that we have direct representation and we all vote for our senators, I think they're all playing to the most extreme to their bases on both sides, and this is why things aren't getting done. But you know, the Senate, they did this with the federal courts, so now it's coming back to haunt them.
Well, are we supposed to, Zed, just ignore what happened for the last year? I mean, I hear McConnell say all the time that this is the only time that there's been a successful filibuster against a Supreme Court justice. And I guess, in a way, I mean, other than Abe Fortas, but in a way, he's kind of right because they never even considered Garland to get to the point where there would have been a filibuster.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously, they're hypocritical. And I don't think the hypocrisy probably is even limited to the Republicans. I think the Democrats often also try to get into these process arguments back and forth. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's simple. The Republicans wanted a more conservative justice to replace Scalia. They didn't want Garland, so they blocked Garland for a full year. And then the Democrats, you know, basically got together and said, hey, we're not going to give you your justice. And so then, you know, the rule change was sort of inevitable in that sense. To me, the bigger question is, why are Republicans willing to take this step to confirm their justice? But at the same time, Democrats never even, you know, they helped George Bush break filibusters for his justices. I think it points to a difference between the two parties. One party was very committed on its ideological goal, and the other party was obsessed with process. And I think maybe that's changing a little bit now, because they did actually stage a filibuster that forced the Republicans' hand here on the nuclear option. But I really do think that this is emblematic of how the two parties approach things. The Republicans have very concrete ideological goals, and the Democrats are often talking about process past the point where anyone actually cares. I doubt most Americans even care that they did the nuclear option. They just, you know, we have a justice now.
Yeah, somebody asked me, you know, what I thought about this, and I was like, well, you know, I don't have too much of a problem with the filibuster going away. I wish the Democrats were the ones that would have gotten destroyed by the filibuster, but you're right, they care so much about the institutions. My question is, Shelby, will Republicans come to regret this move right now? Is there any foresight, I guess? I mean, we saw John McCain say, a stupid idiot thinks that this is a good thing to do, yet he went and he supported it anyway, showing that he's not as much of a maverick as people call him. But, I mean, is there any fear that maybe we're doing something that we might regret?
Well, first, I think it's great that both of you think the Republican Party is a set of ideologues with something to stand for, because I don't. But that's cool. I always thought that was the Democrats. They'll fight
see
for
that
everything.
All of us hate the party that we're supposed to be trying to defend here.
But no, look, I think, I honestly, I think the Democrats did something not really smart here strategically, because he wasn't that horrible of a judge. I mean, they were really fighting to try to find things wrong with him. And I think that if I was Trump, what I think that they're going to do is the next judge is going to be 10 times more conservative. And now what? I would have saved it if it was me. If I was the Democrats, I would have let this one fly, and I would have put up a bigger fight for next round.
That's funny, because I've heard a lot of liberals make this argument that Democrats shouldn't filibuster Gorsuch, because that way Republicans will just nominate Merrick Garland next time, as though there's some sort of like gentlemanliness deal that they're going to come with.
I don't think they would have put up Ralph Nader if Ruth Bader Ginsburg retires or anything. I think they're going to go for the most conservative person regardless. I mean, that's just, and I don't blame them. I mean, that's then their power to do so, but I think they would have done that. So.
All right, let's move on to what's going on in the White House. After just a few months on the job, White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon has been removed from his post on the National Security Council, although there's some conflicting reports. Apparently he was sitting on it this morning. The move comes amidst rumors of a power struggle between Bannon and Donald Trump's increasingly influential son-in-law, Jared Kushner. And as Trump himself has repeatedly started to blame Bannon for the chaos of his first few months as president. A lot of different reports about what exactly is going on here. Shelby, are we seeing a significant demotion for Bannon? Are we seeing a PR game being played by the White House? Are we seeing a shift that maybe the White House is turning away from some of the alt-right influences that got him there and maybe trying to go a little bit more moderate?
Well, from my understanding, I think Bannon was more there to kind of observe and see what was going on and see who had to be moved out or who was trying to undermine him. Bannon comes off to me as the guy that thrives on the conspiracies, and maybe sometimes he's right. I'm not saying he's always nuts. I'm saying that I think that's what he's there for, and I think Trump has a few people that he relies on for different situations. And so I think maybe he's just picking and choosing where his strategy is right now. Who knows? Maybe we'll find out in a tweet.
Zed, is it a coincidence that this is happening with Bannon right as it seems like there is an escalation, ramp up to go to war in Syria right now?
Well, I mean, I think it's a good question.
I would think that on that council, Bannon would be on the side saying, no, don't do this.
No, I mean, I think it's interesting in that Bannon has gotten probably a disproportionate amount of attention in that I think he played a very important role towards the latter half of Trump's campaign in terms of political messaging and advertising and things like that. But I just don't see him really winning a whole lot of policy fights in the White House. I think a lot of the cabinet folks, the Supreme Court nominee, are basically in the mainstream of what Republicans want, and I don't think that Bannon has been. I think this is maybe the final straw for him. I think it was reported he was even considering quitting, but maybe the final straw for him in terms of his influence in the White House total, and that I think Trump may feel loyal to him due to his campaign role, but I just don't see Bannon actually winning a whole lot. I think, on economic policy, we have people like Gary Cohn leading the way, and I think on foreign policy, I think that Trump's son-in-law is actually supplanting a lot of what Bannon maybe would have wanted to do.
Yeah, it seems like Bannon's one victory was getting that executive order, and then that crashed, the Muslim ban, and then that crashed and burned. And since then, he's kind of been relegated. But I keep going back to something that was going on when I woke up this morning and looked on Twitter, and that was Trump bragging about how Elijah Cummings said he's going to be one of the greatest presidents in history. And then, of course, Elijah Cummings said, no, I didn't exactly say that. I said, if he does a bunch of things like stop being divisive. And then, we see Trump, at least with this Bannon move, and you could even argue with escalating things and moving down the path to war with Syria, he's trying to reach more of a Washington consensus that might be more accepting of him than how he's managed the first 2 months of his administration. Do you think that Trump is responding to Elijah Cummings here?
No. I do think, though, I used to work on the Hill, and I think that there's a lot of people on the Hill that are petrified and don't know what to do with Trump. Everybody, I'll call it the establishment of both sides, have been very comfortable. And now here's this outsider to them that they're not quite sure where his allegiance lies. And I think Trump is, really just enjoying kind of keeping everyone on their toes as he does what he does.
Well, this it comes down to the two ways that the opposition is responding to Trump. One, he's a fascist that must be opposed at all costs, direct confrontation in the streets. The other is he's a guy who's pretty easily manipulated, who really wants to be liked by a lot of people. And maybe Elijah Cummings is thinking that, well, maybe I can stroke his ego a little bit, and maybe after a few months of doing this, Trump will sign a single-payer health care bill or something like that.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. Something I've heard is that when he had his television show The Apprentice, he would spend a lot of time looking at the ratings and basically looking at what worked and what didn't work. I mean, he micromanaged that, right? And it may be that he's micromanaging his presidency now. I think the unfortunate thing is that in D.C., to make people like you, you kind of have to do what the D.C. establishment wants. It's not like he's going to be, reading what voters think or what, folks maybe in Iowa supported him or Ohio supported him. Unfortunately, I think a lot of his pivoting might be more towards an establishment, and which will actually prevent a lot of the problems that he talked about in the campaign from being addressed, I think. Unfortunately, like issues like trade. I mean, for example, he's going to have this meeting with China, and I think a lot of his tough talk about China is just going to go away because it's making people upset, and he'd rather have, Gary Cohn and Steve Mnuchin run the shop.
Well, I guess then the question out of that comes, if indeed he's kind of pushing aside this Bannon wing, trying to appeal to, thinking about what's working, what's not working, and seeing that these sort of alt-right influences within his administration are not working, does that lead to any sort of political consequences in 2018 or even later?
I think there's political consequences for everybody. I think the Trump election had nothing to do with Donald Trump, and it had everything to do with the American people saying, I'm angry and I can't stand all of you. And I just see that continuing into 2018.
What do you think, Zane?
I mean, it's 2 years away, so it's a little bit difficult to predict.
That's what we do here, though.
No, I mean, it's absolutely, but
yeah,
still a tough one.
We didn't have much time to get this last topic. I just want to get your word on this, Zed. There was a bill, Social Security bill, introduced to expand Social Security. It's got 156 Democrats that have signed on to that. That seems like a pretty big number. In just the last 30 seconds we have, does that, show a sign that the party might be shifting toward the Bernie Sanders direction, despite what all the pundits on Twitter are saying?
I mean, I think a lot of Americans just don't care when Democrats whine about Donald Trump. They might find his personality annoying sometimes too, but they actually want solutions to things, and this is a solution. And by the way, if Trump does want to do well in 2018, he really wants to be a little bit of a maverick, maybe he should endorse this bill and come out in favor of expanding Social Security.
Yes, Trump, you're so great. Now sign this bill that expands Social Security. Shelby Emmett, Zed Jelani, thank you both for coming on the show.
Thank you.